Hello everyone, welcome to Sentinel. Before we start, I just want to remind everybody, please subscribe to the channel, like, and share the channel. Share it with your friends, share it with your ex, share it with your mother-in-law, so we can build the Sentinel team. I'd appreciate that. So the last segment we did was about the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Smith, and the statement that he made regarding the Marine Corps not having a DEI program. And that segment went viral. You know, we've got hundreds of thousands of views, thousands of comments. I've read all the comments. I'm still in the process of responding to many of them. So as I was researching the previous segment, I stumbled upon another Commandant of the Marine Corps that was very controversial. And his name was General James Amos. Now, he was Commandant of the Marine Corps, two removed from General Smith. And General Amos has a very unique background. He was commissioned in the Navy in 1970. And in 1972, after flight school, he asked for inter-service transfer to the Marine Corps and was granted that transfer. Now, it's important to remember the date of 1972 because we'll discuss that later on. And then 1978, Amos left the Marine Corps and joined Braniff Airlines as a commercial pilot. And he did this for a couple of years and then came back to the Marine Corps in 1981 time. And then, flew F-4s, F-18s, and had a phenomenal record as a squadron commander and a group commander. Now, fighter pilots are a different animal, especially Marine fighter pilots, right? Because they are pretty intense and they want to win every dogfight. That's the way their brain functions. And they're very independent. They have to be able to operate independently. They fly the plane by themselves, they navigate, they do all the weaponeering and all that stuff, right? So it's a whole different breed of animal. Now, I've seen some great fighter pilots in the Marine Corps. They're phenomenal Marine officers, and I've seen shitty ones also that were just too intense, and all they wanted to do was win, and nobody else was ever right because they always had the right answer, the right solution. So let's talk about General Amos. So Amos commanded a Marines F-18 squadron. And I knew somebody that was in the squadron with them, and he thought the world of, back then, Colonel Amos. And then he commanded a Marine Air Group, and then commanded a Marine Air Wing, and then commanded 2MEF, which I served in. In a subsequent podcast, I'm going to talk about, my experience with General Amos at 2MEF. After 2MEF, he went to the Marine Corps Combat Development Command in Quantico, the same command that General Smith went to. And after that, he became the Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, exact same thing that General Smith did, and eventually became the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Now, he was the first aviator Commandant of the Marine Corps, which is very unique because generally the Commandant of the Marine Corps is an infantry officer because the Marine Corps is predominantly an infantry unit. So he comes in as an aviator. Now, his call sign is like Tamer or Hog Tamer or something like that. Every Marine pilot is given a call sign based on some incident that happened in the early stages of their career. So that's what he was called, Tamer or Hog Tamer. So as Commandant of the Marine Corps, he was very controversial for a couple of reasons. The first incident was there's a Marine base in southern Afghanistan called Camp Bastion or Camp Leatherneck. This was a massive base. The fence line was about 22 kilometers long, and it required approximately 325 Marines on the fence line to guard it. And what happened was the commanding general there, Major General Gerganis, friend of mine, good guy. I mean, phenomenal infantry officer, and with a stellar record, used to be a neighbor of mine. And he was a commanding general, and he made a decision to reduce the Marines on the fence line from 325 down to 100. Now, it was a rational decision, happens. But the problem was the Taliban attacked the base in September of 2012. And during that attack, there were 2 Marines that were killed, Lieutenant Colonel Ribel, who was a squadron commander on the base, and a Sergeant Atwell. There were 8 Marines that were injured. Something like 8 Harrier jets were damaged, and an Air Force C-130. And by some estimates, to the tune of about $500 million. So this incident happened, and there's another general also on base that was responsible for the aviation side, Major General Struderman. And, they're both good guys, phenomenal officers, but, shit happens in combat that's beyond your control. And this is one of those incidents. So rather than holding them accountable. Naval tradition, the captain of the ship is held accountable for everything that goes on the ship. If the ship runs aground, it may not be your fault. You may be asleep, and whoever the watch officer was ran it aground, but guess what? You're going to be held responsible. And so rather than doing that, Amos and Gerganus were pretty close. They'd served together previously, and they were buddies. And I remember Gerganus talking about Amos and what he thought of him. And so a year goes by, and the families they want answers. And Congress wants answers, but in the process, Amos recommends Gerganus for his third star to be lieutenant general. And, there's a massive outcry when this happened for lack of accountability and responsibility. And then Congress finally stepped in and said, he's not going to be promoted. So Amos yanks his name off the promotion list, and then forces them to retire based on their responsibility for force protection of that base. So he could have made that decision a year ago, but he didn't. What he did was, instead of holding them accountable and responsible, he nominated them for third star. Unacceptable. All the while, other battalion commanders and Marine officers had been relieved on the spot, and for a variety of reasons. And in subsequent podcasts, I'll talk about that. The second incident that I want to discuss was that during an operation around the same time in Afghanistan, there's a scout sniper platoon and a scout sniper team that went out on a mission, and they happened to take this young captain with them to sit on the high side and do all the comms for them. Well, in the process, they engaged the enemy. There's several enemy killed, and they decided to take a video and urinate on the dead enemy's body. Certainly against Geneva Conventions. Nonetheless, that video gets out, and Amos at this time was the Commandant of the Marine Corps when this whole thing surfaces, and he goes high and to the right, just goes ballistic, and wants these Marines to be crushed. His words, he wants them to be crushed. And he tells the Lieutenant General under him that he wants them crushed. And the Lieutenant General had some concerns because this is undue command influence, because the investigation has to happen, and there's a due process under the UCMJ. The Commandant of the Marine Corps can't reach down and direct a Lieutenant General what to do, because there's due process. So Amos realizes this. He removes this Lieutenant General and assigns another Lieutenant General, which again was against the rules. The Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Paxton, called down. The Commandant didn't really mean what he said, and because now we're in the gray area, we're going to remove you as a CDA and appoint another CDA. Well, that was a second violation, right? Because you can't really do that, and you certainly can't take a more junior general officer and make him the CDA, and that's exactly what happened. In the meantime, there's a young captain that was left at the hide site with the radio, and Amos went after him as well. The captain never saw the video being taken, never saw the urination, but because he was in proximity of it, Amos wanted him hammered and charged him as well. Later on, because of undue command influence, the captain, obviously his career was ruined. All the charges were dropped. For the three Marines, their convictions were overturned because of the command influence. When the government found out that Amos had conducted undue command influence, they had to overturn the convictions. So Amos had a track record of crushing people and undue command influence. Now, this may be because he's a fighter pilot. He likes to win every dogfight. Could be that Amos just had insecurities of dealing with infantry Marines or the infantry side of the Marine Corps, and he had to prove how tough he was. What a hog tamer he was. And we don't need people like that have something to prove or an axe to grind, because what happens is they take it out on their Marines rather than focusing on the enemy. And unfortunately, people like Amos destroyed hundreds of lives of Marines and their family members. The reason he was so controversial and disliked in the Marine Corps by many Marines was because he didn't have a combat action ribbon. Now, I'm not sure that's really a criteria for being a Commandant of the Marine Corps, but evidently many Marines thought because as Commandant he should have a combat action ribbon, which he didn't. And for an infantryman or a combat arms MOSs, that's very important because it shows that you know the rigor of combat and you've been there. And unfortunately, he didn't have one. And another thing that kind of set him apart and sort of turned off the Marines because his spouse, Bonnie Amos, given a title as the First Lady of the Marine Corps. Now, I'm not sure what that really means. Why has she become the First Lady? Is she wearing, 4 stars, 3 stars, or is she wearing 2 stars or 5 stars? I have no idea. But the Marine Corps doesn't put up with horse shit like that. We're not an elitist group. Secondly, the fact that he took her when he traveled around the world, and especially to Afghanistan. So can you imagine being a Lance Corporal or a Corporal, a young troop, and your Commandant shows up with his wife? And what is that young Marine thinking? How come she gets to come to Afghanistan while my wife is sitting back at Camp Lejeune eating bologna sandwiches? So it's crap like that that really pissed off a lot of Marines and turned the Marine Corps against Amos. And many of these are self-inflicted wounds, primarily because of his own personal insecurities. And he wanted to live up to his call sign of Hog Tamer or Tamer. I'm not sure how he got the call sign Hog Tamer. But nonetheless, and the fact that he was taking his wife to Afghanistan on these official visits, that doesn't bode well, especially in a combat zone, because it just again creates this entitlement mindset that officers are thought to have by enlisted troops, and we have to work to make sure that we don't get that. That's why in the Marine Corps, and I'm sure in the other services as well, officers eat last. Officers always do whatever they ask of their Marines to do. So these are important leadership traits. And I certainly never went around anywhere with my spouse. I didn't call her, the First Lady of 1st Battalion, 6th Marines. We don't want leadership like that in the Marine Corps. And when it does rise to the top, we need that leadership to be held accountable. It's really as simple as that. They don't get a free pass. And unfortunately, as I'll talk about, Amos ended up getting a free pass and retired as a 4-star general. Unacceptable. So Amos had grossly violated command responsibility by having undue and unlawful command influence on a judicial proceedings. Now, I'm sure these weren't the only ones. There's probably dozens of other cases out there that he did that just didn't come to light for a variety of reasons. So the third issue with Amos that I stumbled across was that when he did the inter-service move to the Marine Corps in 1972, in his official biography, he claimed that he attended TBS, the basic school, which every Marine officer is supposed to attend, in 1972. And so, he's been submitting these biographies, and there's a career service record that goes up to Congress as an official record, which outlines your entire resume to Congress, and then they vote to if you should be promoted or not promoted, especially for general officers at the 3-star level and above. So he's been submitting these career service records to Congress. And somebody stumbles upon the fact that this guy never went to the basic school. And they make a big deal about it. They start asking questions to the Marine Corps. This is right around the time when Amos is supposed to retire. They start asking the Marine Corps questions. Specifically, there's a Congressman Jones from North Carolina. So the Congressman Jones starts asking questions along with the media. So the Marine Corps comes out and says, well, we've got record that he did attend the basic school in 1972. A journalist pulls up record of Amos ejecting from an F4 in 1972. So that doesn't make any sense. Was he flying F4s or was he going to the basic school? Then the Marine Corps comes back and says, well, he took the Marine Corps Institute non-residence course in 1977, they claimed. Well, it just so happens, allegedly, that that course wasn't designed until 1978. So this whole furball about integrity and he's upholding everybody else to a higher standard than himself kind of, flushes out. And all this stuff is brought to the Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, who I have an incredible amount of respect for. He's an Army enlisted man before, worked his ass off, was a senator, and then eventually became Secretary of Defense. And he's a quite good one. But when all this stuff came to him, he kind of just looked at it and he's like, you know what? There's just too much going on here. And this guy's at the end of the line, and I'll just, so he allows him to retire, in grade, 4-star retirement. Now keep in mind, he basically mishandled the Bastion incident, mishandled and used undue and unlawful command incident on the 3 Marines case, destroyed a captain's life. And oh, by the way, there's also the major of the battalion, the XO, was put on legal hold, and also the battalion commander was put on legal hold. And they weren't even remotely close to the place. Later on, come to find out, the major was the son of a previous commandant, and the legal hold was removed so the son could assume command of a battalion. And so this is the type of stuff that, favoritism that Amos played. And then the final incident was he outright lied on his bio. Now you can finesse it any way you want. It was a typo. It was he didn't attend the course, but he took the non-residence course. And in every Marine's mind, when you say I went to the basic school, that means you went to the basic school. It's a 6-month course. And every Marine officer is essentially required to go to the basic school. There's a handful that haven't, but they readily admit the fact that they didn't go to the basic school for a variety of reasons. Major James Capers, the one that we're all fighting for to get the Medal of Honor, and you'll see my previous podcasts on him, didn't attend the basic school, but he admits it. I didn't attend the basic school because he got a battlefield commission, and when he came back to the United States, he continued to serve in infantry units and never got the opportunity to go to the basic school. But it doesn't hide the fact. That doesn't make him less of an officer. So integrity is very important when it comes to telling the truth and ensuring that you're doing the right thing. And if you start compromising yourself, you're on a slippery slope. Where does it end? Now imagine if Chuck Hagel had not allowed Amos to retire in grade and busted him down, to a 2-star. The message that would have sent the general officers across the military, that integrity matters, that decisions matter. And if Hagel had done that, I don't think many of the incidents that we're having with general officers, fraternization, with general officers making statements that are questionable, that the Marine Corps did not have a DEI program, or general officers that get involved in the Kabul debacle and then are allowed to retire at the 4-star rank. So I think it's very important that the civilian leadership of the Department of Defense hold general officers to one standard. We can't have a 2-tiered system of accountability in the military. It ain't going to work. All the way back to Secretary of Defense Hagel, that should have held Amos accountable. He didn't. So, this thing just continues on. And once precedent is set, the next Secretary of Defense comes along, he looks at it, and the lawyers advise him, well, sir, the previous guy didn't, so, let this guy go. And until and unless we start holding our general officers accountable for the loss of lives of our sons and daughters, we're never going to succeed. So it's almost like these generals can get our sons and daughters killed, and it's okay. It's not okay, because they need to be held accountable. And they owe it to the mothers and fathers of America and the taxpayers. We need the right people in positions that, first of all, take this responsibility seriously. And if they did, they'd be the first one to say, you know what, I failed, I retire, I resign. And if you go back to D-Day, Normandy landings, General Eisenhower had actually written a letter of resignation and accepting full responsibility for the failure of D-Day. Same thing with Admiral Nimitz. When he's committed all his carriers, and he penned a letter saying that, if they'd failed, that it was his responsibility and he resigned his commission. Those are honorable men. Those are warriors. Warriors are honorable. Generals should be more honorable and value the lives of our sons and daughters. I think those are the type of people we want, the ones that value it, and those are honorable enough to say, you know what, I screwed up, I resign, I retire. And if we have a culture like that, I think the military is going to fundamentally change. We don't need people like Amos who cover the footprints and target young troops to be crushed when we ought to be crushing the enemy. That's what should be happening. Or they play favorites with one general because they happen to like him, and they're recommended for a 3rd star when we've lost 2 Marines, 8 wounded, and $500 million worth of aircrafts damaged and destroyed. And that's unacceptable. And finally, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share. Send the link to your friends. Send it to your ex. Send it to your mother-in-law. Get the word out there. I'm counting on you. That's all I got. Stay rugged. Stay united. Con out.